Segment three, Gold and Black Live, joined by Brian Newbert. We're going to talk some hoops. The Purdue takes on Austin Peay tonight. Friday night in Mackey Arena should be going to have another sellout crowd as well. But the Boilermakers have a chance to run their record to 2-0 before the schedule will ramp up a little bit. I want to thank our sponsors, Triple X and State Farm agent Trent Johnson, of course, Bruce Weber and Tom Dienhart for segments 1 and 2. All right, Brian, you had, I think Purdue passed the eyeball test for the most part against Milwaukee. Impressed by the way they played, though they didn't shoot it all that well. But other than that, tonight, another game where Purdue's a 20-plus point favorite. But what do you try to get out of this if you're Purdue tonight when the Governors come calling?
Yeah, you just have to keep improving game to game, probably more so week to week. There's going to be there's obviously going to be ups and downs with a team as young and new as Purdue is. But I think when you look at that game against Milwaukee, how often are Zach Edey, Caleb Furst, and Trey Kaufman-Renn going to go 8 of 23 on 2-point field goals? I think that was an outlier. And I think if you're sitting here and they go their normal like 15 to 23, even 16 to 23, I think you're looking at that game very differently. And I'm not saying people ought to be looking at it like there were a whole lot of major flaws in it. I think Purdue, in the totality of their opener plus their exhibitions, plus the private scrimmage against Cincinnati, I think Purdue has looked pretty good for a team with as much newness to it as Purdue is. I don't think there's a whole lot of red flag here in terms of the way Purdue started the season. I think they're doing a decent job taking care of the ball. I think they look like they've played together offensively more than they actually have. I think you always have to do a better job keeping the basketball in front of you defensively, but I think they've been okay there. Not great, but okay. I think the starting point here, I think the floor is a little bit higher than it very easily could have been. As I said, after the Truman State exhibition game, had Purdue just come out in that game and looked like they'd never played basketball before, that wouldn't have been all that shocking. But they looked like something much more. And then I thought they looked okay against Milwaukee as well. I think there were just some things that, Zach Edey's got to finish a little bit better around the basket, but he was elite defensively. That was as good a defensive game as I think he's ever played at Purdue. I think the two freshman guards obviously showed you what they can do. I think Brandon Newman's playing well. I think Purdue's got a lot going for it right now and all upside from here because I think this is a team that, as I've said many times, November and December are all about the process, and they're all about just getting better week to week, things like that. And I think, but I think the floor has been set relatively high considering everything Purdue has to overcome in terms of their inexperience and things like that.
Yeah, the only black eye in this program is David Jenkins Jr. and bring our viewers up to date with him, and also Camden Heide. What may happen down the road? Is anything cooking on that front that you're aware?
Yeah, David Jenkins obviously has a horror movie of a black eye.
Brutal. Yeah.
To my knowledge, it's only a black eye. There's no structural damage, even though. It's hard to look at his face.
Oh, it is. It's really tough.
And not think there's something more to it than just the black eye, But he went to the doctor yesterday, apparently had it drained, which is gross. But it's possible he gives it a go tonight. But as much time as he spent in the last week with one eye open, I would temper your expectations for what you're going to see from him if he plays tonight. Camden Heide is they're weighing their options on a red shirt, doing what they did years ago with Aaron Wheeler, where they're kind of giving him a couple games, couple weeks, whatever it might be, couple games actually, just to kind of sit back and watch and kind of make their decision in terms of whether they want to do the red shirt or not. People never believe this, but it is up to the player. It is not, and that doesn't mean that Matt Painter has to play the kid if he decides he doesn't want a red shirt, because he still has to, win games. But it is up to the player. Any player can come to Painter and say, I don't want a red shirt, and then he's not going to red shirt. But again, that doesn't mean that Painter's automatically going to put him in the playing rotation.
Yeah.
But my guess is that this ends with him taking a red shirt, which would make all the sense in the world. He's a guy who, has a lot of upside to him, but B, also he played like 3 games last year as a senior in prep school. He missed most of the summer, per my understanding, and then he missed a week or 2 during the preseason too, with a completely separate injury. So he's not practiced as much as the guys that he would be competing with for minutes. Now, that being said, Brian Waddell didn't practice all summer either, but Brian Waddell's looked pretty good.
I like him.
Yeah. So I would have to think that the practical side of this takes over, and he ends up redshirting. And all you have to do here is look at the team around you to understand anymore the value of redshirting, because look at what Trey Kaufman-Renn is relative to what he would have been a year ago at this time. Brian Waddell obviously tore his ACL, so he's probably a bad example of the benefits of a redshirt year. Brandon Newman and Mason Gillis both benefited from it. It just makes sense. And my guess is that's where ultimately this ends up. He cannot play in the meantime because you can't set foot on the floor in a regular season game and still redshirt unless you're going to claim an injury, which that's not how Purdue's going to play this. But I'd anticipate that ending with him taking the redshirt year. That's just my guess. I mean,
and I understood. Mike Krzyzewski, I happened to listen to his show last night on XM and just talking about how they ought to do heights and weights and average age of teams. And you've talked about this at length last year about the COVID year. Purdue's average age on this team is relatively young, but you do have guys, Gillis, Newman, David Jenkins Jr. that are, again, that red shirt comes in. And when you build that average age up, Matt Painter likes to have that as time goes on. That has to weigh into decisions for young guys like Heide and others that early on in their career.
Yeah. Now Purdue's only benefiting from one COVID year here, whereas, last year they were playing a Big Ten full of adults.
Yeah.
With a team that was still maturing, and that cost Purdue a Big Ten title. That's reality. If Brad Davison and Jordan Bohannon and all these other guys aren't in the Big Ten anymore, I'm trying to think of who else. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Then Purdue's problems last year as a team aren't exploited the way that they were exploited, and Purdue wins the Big Ten. Now Purdue's only benefiting from one COVID year this year. That's David Jenkins, but it's been Matt Painter's MO to try to get old and stay old. That's kind of a mantra for a lot of college basketball coaches. That's not unique to Painter, and that's part of the redshirting thing. But it's easy for longtime observers like us in college basketball to see that. But when you're 18 years old, and
no doubt,
this is the moment you've been waiting your whole life for, it's probably a little bit easier. It's probably a little bit easier for us to look at it that way than it would be in the moment. That being said, I don't think this isn't have any real reason to believe this is like a blowback issue as much as it's simply a, hey, let's kind of take our time with this issue sort of thing, and let's really kind of educate ourselves on what the situation is here, more than it's no, I'm not doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do think a few years back, maybe there was a little bit of brushback from Aaron Wheeler's camp on this, because they wanted some more discernible data on how this impacted people, when every player is different. So, but right now, Purdue's track record with success among players who've redshirted is much different than it was back then too. So you can sit here and point to Sasha Stefanovic when you couldn't do that before. You can point to Trey Kaufman-Renn, even though his career is all of one game old to this point. You can go talk to Brian Waddell. Now, Brian Waddell, I mean, thank God for him, he redshirted, because had he played in a game, and I can't remember if he hurt himself before or after the first regular season game.
I think before, yeah.
But that they still could have gone back and gotten a waiver had had this happened the way I'm describing it. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, the inevitable part of this is anytime Purdue loses a game this year, Camden Heide will be the best player on the team in the court of public opinion. That's just the way redshirting works. The Brandon Newman, Mason Gillis thing was as predictable as could be. But I think a lot of this is born out of regret on Matt Painter's part, too. I think, he will always carry with him regret over not redshirting Ryan Smith.
Yeah.
Basically wasting a year of his career. And I think it's probably getting there, too, with Ryan Klein, where you played too many shooting guards his freshman year, and a fifth-year Ryan Klein would have made all the difference in the world for you, as opposed to, the best of Ryan Klein you got on a team that won the Big Ten and almost went to the Final Four.
Yeah.
Had you had that coming out of that year, a lot of Purdue's problems that year, the year that followed, wouldn't have been as acute or existed entirely, because Ryan Klein would have made all the difference in the world on that team that went sideways, that never technically missed the NCAA tournament because of it, because there was no NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
But I think you just want to maximize the value of a guy's career. And I think that's kind of where the focus lies on things like this. And it's a matter of selling that to the young people and their families, and trying to get them to understand the big picture more than the moment.
Yeah, no question on that. Okay, we will number of other topics we'll be hitting up throughout this entire season. Brian, we always appreciate your expertise, and look for his coverage tonight on goldenblack.com and then some YouTube channel as well. Remember too that you can join goldenblack.com for $1 a year, and make sure you do that. We're now part of the
For the first year.
For the first year. For the first year. That's correct. We will charge you more after that, but we appreciate all the folks that have come over so far. So we appreciate all of the matriculation and migration, all the words that you want to use is happening at goldenblack.com. I want to thank also our good friends at WLFI, of course, Gordon Jackson and Mary Truax for helping put this together. We will have a show next week as well, and we'll have some special guests. In fact, Mitch Daniels is going to join us. That will be his swan song. I know that will be the big thing for him on Golden Black Live. We'll be talking, obviously, Purdue Marquette basketball with Brian after that, too. So next week will be a good week for the show, and then we'll be off for the week of Thanksgiving. So thanks to State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and also to Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. We appreciate them very much, and we'll see you next week on Golden Black Live.